it, lost wages, and a superhero costume.
Court come to order. All rise.
Have a seat, please.
Case 2162, Newton versus Estrada.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Mr. Newton, you retained the services of Mr. Estrada to make you a costume.
Yes, ma'am.
And it was, according to your complaint, you make a living as an influencer?
Yes, ma'am. I produce content.
Now, Sarah has actually tried to explain that to me, what that is. And I think the kindergarten version of what she told me was, you are on the internet and your idea is to get as many people to follow the things that you do in your life as possible. And you post on the internet your pictures doing whatever you're doing. And then when you have enough people, advertisers, people who make products, pay you to tout their products one way or another, and that's how you make a living.
Yes, ma'am.
Thank you.
No problem. Anytime.
Okay. So you don't produce anything, you just being you.
Well, no, but I do own 3 companies, and one of them is a social media advertising company. So it's important to meet and mingle with as many people as possible.
I get that, but it's all to support your primary function.
Yes, ma'am.
As we had a case years and years ago, it was one of my favorites. It was a guy who was being supported by a woman. And quite frankly, I couldn't see what this perfectly delightful, productive woman, what she saw in this guy. But I said, she gives you this, she pays your rent, she pays for your food. What does she get in return? And I'll never forget his answer. He said, she gets a me. So I don't know why that came to mind when you're talking about being an influencer. How does that happen? Anyway, you asked Mr. Estrada to do a costume for you. You like to go to events. I don't have to hear all about it. I sort of understand it a little bit now. You contracted with him to make this costume for you for $1,000. You paid him a $500 deposit. He delivered the costume, albeit he delivered it a little late, but you accepted it. And then you didn't pay him for it because you say it was not made well.
Yes.
And you have the costume now?
Yes, ma'am, I do.
Okay. In addition to the costume, you gave him another costume that you wanted him to just put another applique on of something. It was a relatively minor thing.
Glue something.
Whatever. You asked him to do something. It was work. He's not your brother, uncle, father. You're not related to him. That's his business. And when you refused to pay him the balance of the costume that he made for you, he has the other costume, and he says, when you pay me, you can get your costume back. Am I clear?
Yes, but we have talked about creating multiple different costumes in the future, and every single time there was a dollar amount mentioned. This was never discussed. Okay. You discuss it prior, but that was never discussed.
Well, that's true. And whose fault is that?
It was never brought up. But
No. Whose fault is that?
I assume.
No, just a second. If the complaint about the costume that he was just supposed to put an applique on of some sort of a creature, a spider or something, if you gave it to him, and this is his business, then you say, how much is it? So I'm just letting you foment that in your head, sir. When did you order this costume from him for $1,000?
August 7th.
And he delivered it in October.
October 8th, I believe.
And what was wrong with it?
Many, many things.
Just say you have it with you.
I have every single bit of the costume with me.
I'd like to see it.
You like one piece at a time?
No, just a second. That's a boot. What else?
This glove.
Just a second, that's a glove.
Yes.
Okay.
And he actually has plenty of pictures that he sent me in the chat that he was actually making the glove himself. This comes from a costume store from the main movie that this comes from.
Okay,
and it came out in 2005. He sold me a glove that was almost 20 years old, and he said he was making me one.
Okay, keep going.
And this belt right here, I only tried it on once to see how everything fit, and by the time I tried to take the belt off and on, it broke between 20 minutes of use in the house, just testing it out in the mirror.
I just want to see that. I see boots, I see a glove.
Right there.
Looks perfectly normal to me. And that's put on with Velcro.
Yes.
No big deal. You put on another piece of velvet. That's a substantial belt. Put it back. What's your next complaint?
Well, number one, not only did
Just a second. I don't want to see the glove anymore. I saw the glove. I saw the boot. I saw the belt.
Well,
Where's the rest of the costume?
Here's the other boot.
Just a second. Hey, where's the rest of the costume?
It's kind of heavy.
We don't have a mannequin or something we could put this on? We don't have a mannequin or something we could put this on?
We could put it on him. Put it on him. Ask him to put it on. I want to see what's wrong with it. It's a costume. Listen to me. I'm not hearing you
I
anymore.
don't think you're being very fair.
It's not a popularity contest, sir. You bought something. I bought many
also
things.
principle involved,
This is not.
which is
this
why
is
I
not.
decided to
This
take
is
this
not.
to court.
This is not.
Principle.
You're out. Goodbye.
And later today,
So you were there for a little less than 12 hours, right? You came at 5 o'clock in the afternoon,
On
and
the
at
11th.
4:30, and at 4:30 in the morning, you left.
I didn't actually leave. I was told to leave.
But you left.
Cade Newton claims costume designer Robert Estrada sent him a poorly made superhero costume. Robert is countersuing for the balance owed on the costume.
Okay, now, would you do me a favor? Just put the belt on. I know that you can't use the Velcro because a piece of the Velcro came off. Put the belt around. I just want to see how the belt's supposed to go.
For the record, it doesn't go like
Just a
this.
second. I didn't ask you anything. I just said put it on. No, you have
It's actually really difficult with this robe on.
Now turn around. Oh, okay. Very good. Now you can take all the show and tell away, and you can take it off.
Your Honor, if I could say something.
You don't have to say anything. I've seen the costume for which he wanted to charge you $1,000.
Well, there's still more.
Yeah, but you don't want to put that on now, because
No,
you
it's
don't
not,
have to
it's
put
not
that on
something
again.
you have to put on. We're looking at the showmanship. This should be one continuous piece.
Mr. Newton, get a life. Get a life. Get rid of that stuff. Put it over there on that chair. This is not a $25,000 costume. It's a $1,000 costume. If you go into a store to buy any costume, without boots, without leather glove, it's a couple of $100, not made. And if you don't like the way it was made, don't use the services again. According to what I read, you have lots of costumes.
I have two. The one there and the one that he brought of my possession.
Oh, okay, so you just have two costumes.
Yeah.
Great, now you have two. Now you pay him $500 for the costume that he made for you. That's the balance that you owe him for the costume. Now we're going to talk a little bit about the...
I'm not accepting the costume because it's
Just a
not
second.
up to my...
That's why you're in court, sir. I don't care whether you like it or not. Don't use his services again. He made it, you bought it. Based upon my view of that, it may not be perfect.
I paid for it to be perfect. That's
Just
the
a
reason
second.
why I bought
Just
it.
a second. I like a lot of things perfect, sir.
There's no
Life
reason
is
why I
not
bought it.
life is not perfect. You're going to pay him for the costume.
paid for
No,
perfection.
you're going to pay him for the costume. That's it. That's why you're here, for me to make a judgment. If I looked at this thing and didn't think that, for instance, when you sent him those boots, were the soles falling off the boots?
No, there will not.
I didn't think so. That's for my benefit. He's going to pay you the $500 that he owes you for the costume.
The belt
And then he
wasn't.
bought it.
The belt wasn't falling apart either, but one use, and within 20 minutes of trying it on, and voila.
Just a second, Mr. Newton. I'm done with that. I'm on to the next gig. I'm on to your other costume that he was supposed to put an applique on. You have that costume?
I do.
Very good. Now, I want to tell you something. He didn't send those boots with soles off.
They don't fall off by
Just a
themselves.
just a second. No, they don't fall off by themselves.
And I didn't wear it anywhere.
I don't care whether you wore it anywhere, and I know they don't fall off by themselves, and he didn't send them that way. So you figure out, let the people out here figure out what's in my head, how the soles came off both of those shoes.
You can tell me
I'm
why
not-
one
I'm
piece
not-
of the
listen to
costume has
me.
a bigger
Listen
arm
to
than
me.
the other.
Listen to me. I'm not hearing you
I
anymore.
don't think you're being very fair.
Listen.
Just to be
They
frank.
said it-
I'm a big fan
they-
of you, but I
they-
don't think you're very fair right now.
It's not a popularity contest, sir. You bought something. I bought many
also
things.
principle involved,
This is not.
which is
this
why
is
I
not.
decided to
This
take
is
this to
not.
court.
This is not.
Principle.
You're out. You're gone. Goodbye. Your case is dismissed. Do you want your costume back?
Yes, ma'am.
Good. How much was it to put the applique on it?
It was $100.
$100. Very good. Judgment on the counterclaim, $600. He gets the costume back.
Yes.
You understand?
Completely.
We're done.
Thank you.
Court is adjourned.
I paid a pretty penny for something that was just fabric and boots.
I tried to explain how the costume works, and unfortunately, he didn't really listen. He doesn't listen.
It's one of my favorite things of all time. I've always wanted it.
Well, I gave him what he wanted, but when I delivered it, he actually didn't take the time to hear me tell him how the suit goes on.
So what do you think the likelihood is that the defendant shipped those boots with the soles the way we saw them in court today?
0.
I totally agree. I think that the plaintiff thought it would help his case to have a little bit more destroyed of a costume than
Drama.
maybe it was, and doesn't look good for him.
Actually, I thought that what was sent, the boots were substantial. There's no question that he dislodged the soles from them before he came here. The belt was a really substantial belt. What he was complaining about was a piece of Velcro.
And it's a costume belt. Velcro comes off the clasp.
Yeah, and you
come
put it back
undone.
on.
You just
Put
super glue
glue-
it back
yeah.
on.
Absolutely right. There was clearly $1,000 worth of work that went into that costume and putting it together with the boots and the belt and the glove. It was really sort of outrageous that he didn't pay it. Anyway, made my life easy, besides the fact that he was a nudnik.
Case 2135, Coleman versus Washington.
I'm not sure who said it, but somebody will tell.
Kimberly Gutierrez is suing her mother, Rhonda George, for false allegations, debit card charges, and personal belongings.
Court come to order. All rise.
Have a seat, please.
Case 2131, Gutierrez versus George.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Miss Gutierrez, this is your mother.
Yes, ma'am.
And who is this?
My grandmother.
And that's your daughter.
Yes.
I'm reading the complaint and the answer, and this is what your complaint is about. You claim that your mother had you falsely arrested, as a result of which you spent 4 months in jail. While you were in jail, it is your claim that your mother used a debit card of yours, I think $3,000 worth, and you had some belongings at her house that you want. I gather that you've had some problems in your own life. You have at least 3 children.
Yes.
Was the state ever involved in placing the children in foster care?
No.
And what about your daughter?
My daughter, yes.
And how old is your daughter?
She's 19 months.
At what point did the state become involved with your daughter?
In May of this year, May 18th of this year, when there was false allegations made against, when my mom refused to give me my daughter back.
In May, when you brought your daughter to your mother's house, when?
I called my brother on May 17th of 2022, and I asked him to babysit my daughter.
Your brother. And does your brother live with your mother?
Yes, he was staying with her at that time.
So on the 17th, you asked your brother, who was staying with your mother, if he would babysit for your daughter. Where were you going?
I was needing to go to Fresno, and I had just received my income tax check. So I needed to go to Fresno, and I was on foot because my car was impounded the day prior.
Were you going alone?
To Fresno, yes.
So you brought your daughter on the 17th of May to your mother's house, and your brother was supposed to watch him, according to you, while you went to Fresno.
Yeah, he met me down the street, actually, because there's a restraining order. So I didn't actually go to the resident.
Who has a restraining order?
My mother has a restraining order on me.
Is the restraining order that she has against you a final order or a temporary order?
It's good for 3 years. That's all I know.
That's a final order. Was that a final order of protection after a trial, or did you consent to it?
I was not notified of the court date. Didn't consent to anything.
Okay, so it was a default.
I don't know what that means.
It means you didn't show up and they entered a final order of protection in favor of your mother. So you're not permitted to go to her home.
Right.
Since that's not really the subject of this, I don't have to get into it. In any event, you went on the 17th, you dropped your child off at your mother's house, your brother was there, and then what happened?
I finally got to Fresno, I got a ride, I got to the check cashing place. It literally took me...
Don't tell me, I'm not interested in that. 17th, you dropped the child off. You were supposed to pick the child up when?
That evening.
On the 17th?
Yes.
And did you?
I showed up it was a little before 10. I showed up, I called my brother, I said, I'm down the street. He was like, yeah, I'll be right there.
10 o'clock at night?
It was almost, ma'am, I was on foot. And
No, just a second. I asked you 10 o'clock at night.
it was right before 10, yes.
Okay.
When I got there, I called him. It had been about 15 minutes had gone by, and I called him back, and I said, where are you at? And he said, Mom won't let me leave with the baby. And I said, what do you mean? And he said, Mom won't let me leave with the baby. My mother instinct kicked in, and I went in like fight or flight. And I walked down to my mom's house, and I knocked on the door and was asking for my daughter. I finally came to my...
Okay, so when your brother said that to you, instead of going to the police, you violated the order of protection.
I ended up leaving and calling the sheriff.
Okay, but you didn't. You went to
Of course,
you
yes.
went
I
to
was going for my daughter. Yes, ma'am.
Okay. And what happened at 10 o'clock at night or 10:30?
Yes, I finally realized that about 5 minutes of being at the house, I was like, okay, you need to leave. So I left because she wouldn't open the door to give me my daughter. I left. I called the sheriff, and so I told them the situation. So they had walked down to my mother's and let her know that what she was doing was basically...
No, not what she was doing. The police came
and told her
with
that they
you.
could arrest her. And told her that if she did not, that she needed to get my daughter back. But because it was late, the baby was already asleep. And so the cops that came back down to me, and they said, look, we don't, because they knew me.
Whatever. I'm allowing you to give me a certain amount of hearsay so that I can make this story make sense.
Oh, okay.
Do you understand? But don't tell me because they knew you, what they thought.
Yes, ma'am.
You were told to come back in the morning.
Yeah, the agreement was that between my mom and the sheriff was that I could pick up Malia in the morning. The sheriff told me to call before 6 o'clock in the morning before he got off his shift, and that he would come back out and do another standby. The next morning came. Between me and my grandma, I had us call my mom. And
No, just a second. What does that mean between you and your grandma? Your agreement was you were supposed to call the sheriff. The sheriff, according to you, before 6.
I called my grandma.
No, not the grandma. The agreement was you weren't supposed to call your grandma. You were supposed to call
right,
the
but
sheriff.
I needed a ride. So I called my grandma to have her come pick me up.
Just a second. Where were you?
I was staying at a friend's house. I didn't live in Selma.
Just a second. You were staying at what friend's house?
The sheriff came, got behind us, and tried to pin us in, and my grandma went to take off.
So your grandmother was driving.
Yes, ma'am.
And she was trying to evade the police to go someplace else.
Kimberly Gutierrez claims her mother, Rhonda George, owes for debit card charges and personal belongings.
You were staying at what friend's house?
My friend Isaiah's.
Isaiah.
Yes. I stayed the night there waiting for my daughter.
Just a second. Isaiah. Isaiah what?
Bonilla.
And what is your relationship with him?
He's my best friend. He's been my best friend since high school.
Where are you living now?
I live with my grandmother right now since I was released.
Full time?
Right now, yes.
What do you mean right now, yes?
I'm in the process of getting my own place.
Okay, so you called your grandmother and then?
Called the sheriff.
And then?
Waited for the sheriff to respond.
And then?
The sheriff did not respond for a few hours.
Okay, so you were waiting for the sheriff to respond. The sheriff did not respond until when?
It was after 7 o'clock in the morning, and it wasn't even yes, ma'am, 7 a.m.
7 a.m. Your daughter is, according to you, 19 months old? 19 months old. And she had prior to that been living with you?
Yeah, she was living with me all the time, yes.
She was living with you?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, so now let's get back to this arrest that you had. According to your papers, your daughter was with you up until that time. What time did she wake up in the morning?
Usually she wakes up between 7:30 and 8 o'clock in the morning.
Okay, well, then could you tell me why, if she wakes up between 7:30 and 8, why you would even contemplate picking her up before 8 o'clock in the morning?
Because one of my issues was with certain officers that would have been responding, and the officer that responded the night of the incident, he told me, if you wanted me to be the officer to respond, you need to call me before I get off my shift.
Fine, but he didn't respond to you. But according to you, he didn't respond to you.
No, it was a different officer.
So then my question to you is...
They did respond at 7 o'clock in the morning.
And did what?
It was a horrible mess.
Well, he did what?
They responded. When they responded, he showed up. The officer told me that he did not want to be there. He said, if I have my way, you'll never see your daughter again. And I looked at him, and I said, wow. Okay.
What do you mean you looked at him? Where were you when you looked at him?
I was right next to him, but I just...
Where, at the precinct or at your house?
No, down the street from my mom's.
Okay, so he responded to you when you were down the street at your mother's house, and he said, I'm not getting involved in this, and if I had my way, you would never have your daughter. And so what did you do?
So at that point, my grandma pulled up, and I told him, I said, your assistance is no longer needed, and that my grandma could just get my daughter. And he says, well, you already called me. The deputy did. So I said, okay, whatever. He asked me if I had somewhere to live, and I said yes. And whatever. And so he went down to my mom's. When he went down to my mom's, he was supposed to just go down there and get my daughter. When he was taking too long, I could walk so far this way and I could see straight down my mom's street. So I did. When I did, I seen that my mom was out there just giving him an earful. I know this woman very well, okay? So I just imagined what was being said about me. Well, I guess the back door is screwed and nailed shut at the house. I don't know why.
I don't know. It's not important.
Yeah. So anyways, my best friend went over the back fence.
What do you mean your best friend?
Isaiah Bonilla.
Oh, so you brought Isaiah with you.
He went.
Just a second. So you have your grandmother, and then you've got Isaiah, your best friend, also to go to your mother's house.
Yes, ma'am. He got my daughter.
Isaiah brought her to where you were.
Yes.
And then what happened?
I started walking back towards Isaiah's house. When I started walking back towards Isaiah's house, my grandma pulled up in her car and she was like, "Are you ready to go get your car out of the impound lot?" And I said, "Yeah, I'm ready." And so I got in her back seat with my daughter. When I got in the back seat, I got in the middle. Well, then she was like, "Well, I don't know what's gonna happen. Your mom's over there saying a whole bunch of stuff to the deputies, so I don't know what's gonna happen." And so I was like, "Well, I gotta go get my stuff from Isaiah's." So I go to jump back out the car. As I go to jump back out the car.
Wait, just a second. Now you have your daughter.
Because I needed my wallet. My bag was at Isaiah's. My purse and everything was at Isaiah's. I was gonna go back and pick it up. Well, right when we were gonna go back, the sheriff came, got behind us, and tried to like pin us in, and my grandma went to take off.
So your grandmother was driving.
Yes, ma'am.
And she was trying to evade the police to go someplace else.
Yes, ma'am.
And how many police cars were involved?
One.
Were there ever any more than one police car?
Once we got to the police department, of course, there's a police department.
No, I'm talking about the number of police cars. So there's a police car
Oh,
now.
like coming behind us? No, it was just one.
Was just one.
Yes, ma'am.
And you were accelerating
No.
to get there? Was the police car siren on?
No.
Well, how did you know that he was trying to pull you over?
Because he tried to hit her car.
Oh, that would give you a clue. So you're telling me he tried to hit your grandmother's car without notifying you in any way to pull over?
Yes, ma'am. That's why I spent 4 months in jail, and I beat my case. I went to trial and beat my case. Everything was dismissed.
I'm not responsible for the criminal justice system. I'm only responsible for what goes on here.
Yes, ma'am.
So I assume once you got to the police station, both you and your grandmother were arrested.
Yes, ma'am.
And that was in May.
Yes, ma'am.
And now uncross your arms. And now we're in December.
Yes, ma'am.
Of the same year.
Yes, ma'am.
And you're out of jail.
Yes, ma'am.
And you've been out of jail for about...
Since August 25th.
Who does your daughter live with?
Right now, she's with the mentor. She's my ex-husband's aunt, ma'am.
And who placed her with your ex-husband's aunt?
I did.
Not the court?
No, I requested her.
Does the child's great aunt have guardianship?
No,
custody?
I'm getting my daughter back, ma'am.
But for the last 3 months, she's been with this aunt.
Right, because Child Protective Services did get involved, and Child Protective Services, I've been doing everything that...
Well, that's what I asked you. I asked you whether Child Protective Services
Child Protective Services did get involved with my daughter, yes.
Did. That's what I assumed.
And I've been drug testing, I've been
Just
doing...
a second.
Yes, ma'am.
That's what I assumed, that Child Protective Services was involved. And so if Child Protective Services are involved, then they are overseeing the child's placement with the aunt. You have an ongoing case.
Yes, ma'am.
Probate court.
No, not probate.
Which one? Family court?
Family court, yes.
When was the case opened with regard to your daughter in the family
May
court?
18th, the day I got arrested, ma'am.
And that child became involved with the foster care system in May. Okay, so your grandmother also spent a little time in jail. How much?
2 weeks.
I quite frankly don't understand your case.
While I was in jail, Your Honor, while I was incarcerated, my mom had all my debit cards, my ID. She had went and actually, because of me getting arrested, she had went to Isaiah's and picked up all of my stuff.
You mean, just a second. Let me understand this. It is your claim that the reason that you had to go to Isaiah's house was to get your pocketbook, your wallet, your credit card that you left there.
But I never made it there.
I understand that. And Isaiah, clearly, from what you tell me, knew of the problem because he was part of this little conspiracy to get your daughter out of the house and was at the back of the house to pick up your daughter who was being put over the fence. So why would Isaiah give your mother...
Because she went over there with a baseball bat and busted out his windows. On February 4th this year, I lost my twins, okay? And that was the first time I had contacted my mother because I was going through it. And I messaged her and I told her, I said, I really need my mom right now. If anything, I need my mom right now.
Kimberly Gutierrez is accusing her mother, Rhonda George, of wrongfully using her debit card and keeping her belongings.
So why would Isaiah give your mother?
Because she went over there with a baseball bat and busted out his windows. And the reason why all of my things were at my mother's was because I hadn't lived at my mom's for over a year.
What your case is about
Is my belongings.
You claim that your mother went over and got your wallet from Isaiah's, because I asked you what you were doing here. I certainly am not looking into the allegations of false arrest. It sounds as if you did the absolute wrong thing in trying to regain your daughter, whose custody, actually, you lost at a dispositional hearing and was determined to be a dependent child and placed in foster care. That's what happened here.
Right.
Okay, so I'm not even addressing your claims of false arrest.
Okay,
What you
so
did
then-
was actually the wrong thing. I said, so what are you suing for? Now,
My,
you said
my
you're...
belongings,
Okay,
my
what,
money.
Just a second. What money?
She used my CalFresh, which is my EBT food stamps, and my CalWorks, which is my cash aid through the welfare department.
Just a second. So you're suing her for taking your food stamps and your welfare check.
Right.
Just a second. Your food stamps and your welfare check.
And this is the statement from my tax return of all the money that was on there.
On where?
On my debit card. It had over $3,000 on it, and I marked what was used after she had picked it up. And then these are receipts from some of my belongings that was at her house.
Just a second. You haven't lived in your mother's house for...
I moved back to my mother's in the
Just
beginning.
a second.
Yes, ma'am.
You hadn't lived in your mother's house. According to what you said to me, Whitney, was it a year ago? Didn't you say that you moved out of
My
your
mom
mother?
allowed me to come back.
Because there was an order of protection.
She had called me. I was living in Fresno, ma'am.
Just a second. You hadn't lived in your mother's house. You said you were living with your grandmother. For how long were you living with your grandmother before May?
I said I was living with my grandmother right now. I was living in Fresno, ma'am.
I want to know what property you think...
My clothing, my husband's clothing, my daughter's bassinet. I had jewelry there. I had all of my clothing.
Why would all of your clothing be there? You were living with your grandmother.
I hadn't moved into my grandmother's until I got out of jail. I was living in Fresno. And my mom...
Just a second.
You're not
Is
letting
that
me
what...
talk.
I'm not...
All parties, please step forward.
Koana Coleman is suing caretaker Jessica Washington for stolen money, travel costs, and elder abuse.
Miss Coleman, how old is your mother?
90.
Do you live with her?
I do.
How long have you been living with her?
3 years.
You're her primary caretaker?
Yes, ma'am.
She suffers from...
Dementia.
For how long?
I identified it in December of 2019. And I just stayed from that point on, sleeping on her couch.
At some point, you had to go out of town for a period of time.
Yes.
You hired the defendant?
Yes, ma'am.
How did you get to her?
My cousin Andrea was friends with her, and she said that she would be a great candidate.
Did you interview her?
I spoke with her later on. She came by the house, and...
What date did you first speak to her?
Maybe about a day or two before I left.
And on what date did you leave?
The 11th of August.
How long were you going to be away for?
About 7 days.
And tell me, Miss Washington, are you employed now?
Yes, I am.
By whom?
Well, I do self-employment, and I also have my own little business on the side as well, you know, caring for elderly people.
Okay. Did you have any special training for the care of the elderly?
I got my AED and my CPR. No, not really, because basically I've been just dealing with family members.
For how long?
I'm going to say at least like 5 years.
And you had no special training for the care of the elderly? Okay, and did you explain that to the plaintiff?
She knew that.
Don't tell me what she knew. I didn't ask you what she knew. You left, and when you left, you took the $400 that you found.
Because the mother told me to.
You mean the mother with dementia and Alzheimer's who you stayed up with 4:30 in the morning told you to take the $400? Uh-huh.
Koana Coleman claims caretaker Jessica Washington stole money from her mother, who suffers from dementia.
Okay. On what day were you supposed to report her? to take care of her mother?
August 11th.
Did you?
Yes, I did.
Who was there?
It was Miss Coleman and her mother.
And the arrangement that you made with her was for 7 days, and you would be living with her mother.
For 7 days.
And what was she to pay you for the 7 days?
We never discussed a payment.
Well, this is what you were doing for a living, and you had jobs for the last 5 years. Is not an answer. Yes is the answer. And when you work for other people who you'll tell me about, what did you charge them?
I didn't really charge them anything. That's why I'm saying me and her never discussed a price, because she didn't know if I was going to charge her or not. Because I could have watched her mother for nothing, just because. That's family.
Okay, well, this is what the case is about. You watched her mother for 1 day, and then you left. And according to her, her mother fell. When you left, after the 1 day, she had left $400, and you took the $400. That's what she says when you left. Your answer is that you earned that $400 in the 1 day. That's why you took it. You have a counterclaim because she has said to someone that what you did amounted to elder abuse. Now, you started on the 11th. Tell me when you left.
The date that I left was August 12th at 4:30 in the morning because I was put out.
Who put you out?
Her cousin Andrea, which is my godmother, because I called her to help me pick her mother up off the floor, which her cousin told me to leave.
No, you can't tell me what anybody else told you. Prior to 4:30 on the 12th, did Miss Coleman's mother suffer a fall?
Yes, she did.
Okay. And where did she fall?
She fell on the floor. She was sitting at the table where I was sitting at as well, too. I got up to use the bathroom.
At 4:30 in the morning?
We was up all night.
Could you tell me why?
Because she was waiting for her daughter to come back, because before her daughter left out the house, being as though that the lady has dementia and Alzheimer's, they think about the future, the past, and the present. She's thinking that her daughter is coming back because her daughter said, "I will be right back." So that's why she sat up all night long. I was trying to put her to bed. She didn't want to go to bed, so I called.
Okay, so you were there from what time in the morning on the 11th?
I got there at 5 o'clock in the afternoon on the 11th.
So you were there for a little less than 12 hours, right? You came at 5 o'clock in the afternoon,
on
and
the
at
11th.
4:30, and at 4:30 in the morning, you left.
I didn't actually leave. I was told to leave.
But you left.
Yeah, and I didn't want to.
I don't care whether you wanted to or not. It's not particularly relevant whether you wanted to or not. I understand what happened. You left, and when you left, you took the $400 that you found.
Because the mother told me to.
You mean the mother with dementia and Alzheimer's?
Yes, her mother told me to.
Just a second. You mean the mother with dementia and Alzheimer's who you stayed up with 4:30 in the morning told you to take the $400? Okay. Now, you're suing her for a lot more than the $400 because you said you had to come home from your travel. She's not responsible for that. She has to return the $400 to you. You told me 2 minutes ago, Miss Washington, that you never discussed fee.
We did.
Because this is not a question and answer. You didn't even know whether you were going to charge her anything, because as far as you were concerned, it's family. Is not an answer. And you listened to the woman that you had been hired to care for because she has dementia and Alzheimer's and had fallen, and she said to you, take this $400, it's yours. What if she told you to take a piece of her jewelry? Would you have taken that?
No.
Yeah. You would have taken it because she gave it to you.
Because I'm not no thief. I wouldn't.
No, that's not what I'm telling you. You say that you took this $400 because this woman who can't make a judgment told you to take it. What if she said to you, I want you to have my pearls? Why not?
I'm not taking no jury because I have my own. I don't need her jury.
Okay, that's ridiculous. Judgment for the plaintiff in the amount of $400. I'll take a look at the instance that you have on your counterclaim for slander when she says that you are guilty of elder abuse. What do you have to show me?
It's in a court order.
What do you mean it was in a court order?
It is. She went and filed elder's abuse on me, plus the traveling expenses, too. I have that court order.
Just a second. Is that what you're telling me? In her case against you for the $400 and for any other travel expenses, which I'm dismissing, that part of her claim, she said you were guilty of elder abuse. That's protected. Okay, your counterclaim's dismissed. We're done.
Court is adjourned.
I think the judge did a great job. I assumed that she would be able to deal with my mother. It's difficult being a caregiver, and we as people need to do much more to protect our elderly.
We've seen a couple of these cases, and it's so unfortunate to see the elderly, and whether they're ill or sick or mentally not capable of caring for themselves anymore, zero training. that some of these people have to really care for them. And it's scary. We've seen it too many times. And $400 on the counter to someone to just take it for 12 hours worth of work.
You know, it's always struck me as a shame that society has and the government has created situations where you need licenses to do certain things. You need a license to tweeze someone's eyebrows. You have to be a cosmetologist. You have to have a license. You have to go to school. You have to pass an exam. You need a license to have a dog. But the most vulnerable people in the population, those people